Hello everyone, and welcome to another one of our videos. Please take a deep breath, relax, and enjoy.
People who have slept with their boss for a promotion or raise, was it worth it? Currently sleeping with my boss. We work at a bar, he manages and I was a cocktail waitress. He's working on his mechanical engineering degree, eventually, and looking for a new job. And I just got out of active duty, so this is both a temporary job for us and we'll both be quitting within the next year. Aside from a free meal while on my shift, usually we get 50% off, but he just comps it. I haven't really gotten extra benefits. Obviously I'm only dating him for the free meals. And his genitals. Been dating for 3 months now. Kinda relevant, I had a friends with benefits who was the manager at a store that opened in our town, and I think that had something to do with me getting hired. No experience whatsoever. It was generally a nice experience. I got a ton of special treatment and a couple free lunches. It also didn't hurt that he was in the closet, and I'm sure he appreciated my discretion. I slept with my boss at the time, and we secretly hid our relationship for several months. In the end, he told his superiors that we were together, and it was he that ended up getting the promotion and raise. He was taken away from being my direct supervisor, so our relationship could be out in the open. We were married 4 years later. I do some freelance work as a reporter and actually just agreed to a sexual relationship with an editor of a local newspaper I really want to write for. He's 27 years my senior, but the taboo-ness of it is enticing and exciting. And, the obvious advantages work-wise that come with it won't be too shabby either. Kinda feel just a little bit guilty about it, but hey, he's like a George Clooney in the town I live in, so why not? It is not. 2 years ago, the guys around my cubicle were borderline sexually harassing me. I didn't want to bring it up with HR because I made that mistake with another company, and that's a whole mess of drama I don't want to deal with again. I went to my manager's office, hinting that my coworkers are pushing me to the point of quitting. He brings up an open position that pays an extra $75,000 per year that will have its own office, and I can stay there secluded for most of the day. The way he looked at me, I knew what he was hinting at. I asked him when he wants to talk about it. He says he'll pay for a motel and we'll both get off 2 hours before work ends. Nothing straightforward was said. I couldn't even text my husband for the rest of the day. I arrived and we were there for around an hour. No one ever got suspicious afterwards. Was it worth it? No. The next morning, I realized something very important. I didn't need that extra money. I could have just quit and found another job. Now I feel like an outcast in my family, a person who would sell out love for money. I convinced my husband to put the extra money into our kids' college fund for a few years, and then until a vacation account for when they're in their late teens and we can go on a nice cruise, possible have them bring their girlfriends or boyfriends. I'm not spending a dime of that money on me, and I know that's not enough to make up for what I did. When I was in high school I worked at a pretty large movie theater in my area. It was a lot like a restaurant in the sense that everyone is sleeping with everyone and partying most nights together. We had a very cute manager who was probably about 30 and pretty strict on most of the guys who worked there, mainly because we were little high school heads that thought we were the cat's pajamas. Anyway, I hooked up with her after a party and it was great. We became friends with benefits, and since she was in charge of the time clock she would often clock me in a couple hours early on slow days before I showed up, so I was getting paid full-time 40-hour weeks while only working about 20 hours. She would also have me stay late to clean up after late shows, and we would have sex in the regional manager's office since it was the only one without cameras, and because the regional manager was a fear-mongering witch. Slept with my boss when I was 17 and she was 24. No forethought to promotion or a raise, but just because she was an older sexy woman, and I was crap with women at that time. It was all good in the end, happened a couple of times. I got privileges like the hours I wanted at work and in the sections I wanted, as well as a side benefit. Left the job when I went to university and all was good. I would do it again most likely, but not for promotion or advancement, but just because it was good fun. Have slept with a coworker a couple of times. I would say that was more problematic than with my boss. I must admit there are bosses I've had that I would have liked to have slept with, not for promotion or a raise, but because there is something very attractive about a woman in power. I was the boss sleeping with my employee. She was a very mediocre employee to begin with, raging alcoholic, would come to work looking like hell with black eyes and wet hair, never on time. After we started sleeping together I think she developed the attitude that she had to start performing better at work or it would be obvious there was something going on when she didn't get fired. Within a few weeks she's a model employee, probably far better than even I was. She received several small lateral promotions within a few months, one I was involved in and one I was not. We ended up dating for over a year while I was still her boss before we both left the business. We both started looking for other employment because of our relationship and found better jobs with better pay. A few years later we are still together and now living together and engaged. I slept with my boss. We were all out having drinks and were sharing a cab. She told the driver to just drop both of us off at her place and I gladly went with it. I transferred to another department shortly thereafter because we both agreed it was weird now. Unbeknownst to me, I was giving a raise and a new title when I transferred. I always thought of it as a reward for being discreet. I had sex with her because she was a hot older woman. The raise I got later was unexpected. Not a boss but one of my professors at my university. She was in her late 30s and I was 22. It was her first year at the school and was having a rough time meeting people. She was having car trouble so I offered to help her out while I was visiting during her office hours. She offered to feed me dinner, and I was more than happy. We started drinking and ended up in bed. We had a casual relationship for most of the year until I unfortunately had to move after graduating. When finals came around, she told me not to worry about the final, 15-page research paper. Hell yeah. But to be completely fair, I was a really good student with a solid A in her class before we started hooking up. When I was 18 I was part-time running food at a really high-end Italian restaurant. After shifts ended everyone went to the bar next door and got drunk every night. One of the managers was a 24-year-old blonde that I really had a thing for. After a night at the bar we were loaded and she said I could crash at her place. So I went and one thing led to another, we slept with each other and I took a cab home. The next weekend when I had shifts the managers called me in because they fired the bartender and because I'm very hardworking that I'm going to fill his position. Maybe not an office promotion story but I was making a couple hundred more a night bartending than bussing. I had sex with my manager so I could become a full-time waitress. When I started working at my current job I was a hostess. Eventually I was able to wait tables part-time but still, most of my hours were for shifts as a hostess, which only paid minimum wage. I kept pestering the GM and AMs to be made a full-time waitress but there just weren't enough shifts at the time. Eventually my GM announced that he would be leaving to open another restaurant in another state, not part of our small chain, completely different franchise. He ended up taking me aside to tell me that he really wanted to make sure I was promoted to full-time server before he left. I was thrilled. He asked if I'd like to talk about it with him at his house that night. I said absolutely. When I got to his place I realized right away that there was a total quid pro quo type of thing in the works. Yes, he'd make sure I officially became a full-time waitress. He promised that while stroking my thigh, though, and that's when I realized what was happening. Yes, I did it. Keep in mind I never felt threatened or pressured. I wanted the promotion, he wanted sex, and I was okay with that. Did it make me feel a little dirty? Definitely. But it was actually a really fun night that I don't regret. Was it worth it? Absolutely. At the time I was barely able to pay my bills. I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. In the 2+ years since I've managed to save a pretty decent amount of money. When it's not killing me I like the work, too. But if I'd had to wait for that promotion, especially after the GM left, it would have probably been months before I became a full-time waitress. There's no way I would have been able to manage that and I'd have probably ended up getting a different job. So yeah, I was happy with the results. When I was just 18 I had just come out of high school, and I desperately needed a job. I was able to get a job that pays $12 an hour at some guy's small business. The catch is I had to sleep with him. That money was great, but it was really awkward whenever I saw him. I needed the money though, so I would do it again. I worked there for about a week when he confronted me. He said that if I slept with him I would get a $4 raise. I'm not proud of it, but I would do it again. If you're single right now, and you make $50,000 a year, would you sleep with your boss if you get a raise to $75,000 a year? Kinda the other way around. I slept with one of the girls that worked for me. I was in a relationship at the time and this gorgeous, smart, funny girl started working for me. We really hit it off as friends and we started messaging each other, initially work-related. Our messages became more personal and we began to really connect as friends. Then one night my colleague was out with her friend for dinner and invited me along for drinks. We headed to this nightclub and began to drink vodka by the bottle, big mistake, and ended up confessing our feelings to each other. We left the club together and knew what we were doing was wrong, so decided to go separate ways home. By the time I got home I had a missed call. I called her back, and we met in the city where we sat and talked until the early hours. She invited me to go back to hers as temperatures had really dropped. I said yes and we made our way there holding hands and talking. When I got to hers we lay next to each other on the sofa and talked all night. Nothing happened. The next morning was awkward and I went back to mine feeling very confused. A couple of days later we were at a work night out and the pattern repeated as we went back to hers and talked all night. The next morning she kissed me. We slept together. And again. And again. I felt very bad for what I had done, but I couldn't help but feel happy at the same time. I broke it off with my girlfriend, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I now realize that I am completely in love with this girl and we are currently looking for a place to live together. Work got pretty awkward as people realized what had happened and my, now, girlfriend left for another venture. I had a summer job working for the local government. I worked in a department filled with stereotypical middle-aged office women. You know the type. They shower in JCPenney perfume while caking on as much makeup as they can, like it's some sort of competition. Then they come into work for an hour or two so they can gossip and eat the rest of the day. Anyways, I was basically told to file random stuff while they asked me about my life and what I did outside of work, but all weird and creepy. Like they would ask me about my weekend on Wednesdays, so I never knew if they were talking about the previous weekend, or the one coming up. Then the not-so-subtle queries about my sex life would come up randomly. I usually deflected these pretty well. Yet there was this one lady who happened to be the boss of the department who was not really subtle at all. She started hitting on me in the most awkward ways possible. Keep in mind I was 18 and looked 14, and this was a summer job, so there was no room for advancement or raise. Close to the end of the summer she flat out asked if I wanted to have sex with her for a recommendation and a raise if I came back next summer. You get a raise every year you come back. I wasn't that stupid. I did not do it. Slept with my boss. She wasn't hot but cute and I had never been with a curvy girl before. We left a company award ceremony and had a long drive back to our branch, 2.5 hours. Well, long story short, she ended up giving me roadhead and we pulled over to do nasty things. It was fun and we continued our relationship for about 6 months. It ended when she was promoted to regional manager because she was always traveling to different branches. Never got a raise nor a new position. I got to brag to my buddies though. I slept with my boss. Granted, we had to file a form to claim we were in a close personal relationship first. He tried to help me get hired elsewhere so it wouldn't be such a conflict. Then he explained what being in the job for 20 years was like, the politics of it all, how everyone hates it after a few years and burns out. So I quit the job and now I'm going for a law degree, still with him over a year later and couldn't be any happier if I tried, and I think he feels the same. Best decision of my life. I can't even fathom my life without him. He was worth all the stigma and hours changes and pay lost for taking time off to be with him.
Congratulations, you've made it to the end. We want to thank you again for giving us a few minutes of your time, and we wish you have a great rest of your day, night, or whenever you're watching this. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. It really does help us a lot. That's it from me. Roll the outro.